Hey, welcome back to the Build a Basement. Today we're continuing on our journey through Klipper, and specifically we're going to be working on our first homemade macro. So this homemade macro specifically is a nozzle cleaning macro that I designed. Pulled some parts and pieces from different places, but there's a lot of information in this little macro that I think we can all learn from. And the end result, I believe, is a better nozzle cleaning situation. So why don't we start off the video right now by showing you exactly what that nozzle cleaning looks like. All right, I got my zoom in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit my nozzle clean. Might be a little loud, but I will hit it and then you'll see what it is and I'll tell you what it's doing. And one more time from the overhead cam. All right, if you didn't get that, basically what this nozzle cleaning macro is doing is it's not only going left and right, right and left, and kind of scrubbing the nozzle back and forth, it's actually doing back and forth and forward and back. So we're getting all angles of the nozzle as it cleans. Most, if not all, the macros I saw were all back and forth. I didn't look high and low, but I was thinking to myself, it'd be kind of neat if you had a macro that kind of went all directions to try to clean everything off the nozzle. So let's jump right into that macro and take a look at what we have, and we'll go from there. Here we go. All right, so I am right here, right now, in my dashboard for my Klipper instance here on my Voron 2.4 R2, the Ulti-Bib, I think is what we're gonna wind up calling it. Don't recall who voted on that specifically, but I think it works, you know? So macros. So macros are basically little tiny portions of code that can get called upon within other code or someplace else at any time to basically run and do something specific that you want your printer to do. In this particular case, we're looking at a macro that I've called nozzleclean.cfg, which is a config file. Before we go too deep into this though, one thing I will show you is that in order to utilize that macro, you do have to call it in to your printer.cfg file. So you have to include that. So the file basically will pull in that information. It doesn't physically bring it into the file, but it makes it kind of an open book, if you will, so it can kind of refer to that when it needs to. So the printer.config includes the nozzle clean.cfg .config, and that way you can use it either during certain things that the printer normally does, or it can be called on as a macro that you can utilize from your console, or actually from your console or from your dashboard where your macros are. Now you'll notice here on mine I have two. I have clean nozzle and I have deep clean nozzle. Clean nozzle basically is a quicker version, and deep cleaning being a deeper cleaning, right? Sometimes I forget what words I want to use, but and for instance, for that could be on a normal clean nozzle. You could be something, if you're just printing with PLA, you'd wind up just using that one. If you're doing something with PETG or something, you might want to deep clean, or you might want to do a normal cleaning at the beginning of every single print and a deep cleaning at the end of every single print. So not only do you get rid of what was on there before, during the print and whatnot, but you make sure you start with a good clean nozzle, and then after your nozzle's heated and everything like that, you do a quick clean of that nozzle so that you wind up start. So if I hit clean nozzle right now on the console, and I'm just going to show you something here that you may not know. It's going to run that. Probably hear it in the background right next to me over here. What I want you to notice is right here in the console, it basically is stating clean nozzle. So if I go ahead and type clean nozzle, like so, and I hit enter, or I hit the send button here, it's going to run that macro. So basically a macro is just being sent over the console, much the same way that if you have slider bars or anything else down here. So if I want to turn on, say for instance, my case lights, if I do that, my case lights just came on, I probably got a little bit more glowy over on this side over here. But see right here, it says set pin equals case light value .1. Now if I take that and I copy it, and I don't want to get too deep into this because not what this video is necessarily about. I'm going to do 0.5, and I don't know if you'll be able to see the dimming on it, but I'm going to watch the screen here and see if I can see it. I'm going to send that. Yeah, it dimmed down. I don't know if you saw it on camera, but I saw it here, it dimmed down. Now we're at 50%. I do that again by hitting the up arrow and I hit 0. And those lights are completely off. So you can call upon a macro not only in code, but you can also do it from the console. So pretty much when you run like a G28 or a quad gantry leveling or anything like that, you can do all those things directly from your console, which is kind of nice. It makes it easy in some ways to kind of do things quickly. So let's get back into our scrubbing thing here, our nozzle clean config. I'm going to open it up. So right now I am in my machine, I am in my config files, and I do actually have this on my Git. I have a Git now. I've had it for a while, it's been years, but I've never put anything on it. But I will put that in the notes down below, so you can go and pull this file. So when you watch this video, you can actually follow along or look at this file, modify it the way you want, completely screw it up, re-download it again, whatever you want to do, but it'll give you something you can look at and work with. And kind of the thing I'm working on here to try to help out with people is to make these files that aren't overly complex or complicated, but have the information you need to be able to work off it, kind of like a building block. We don't need the 30,000 Lego kit to make the Eiffel Tower. We just need the 100-piece Lego kit to make a big block. It's all the same parts, it's just put together differently. So up here, this is not necessarily required, but we all know when you put the hashes or the pound symbols, that basically is commented out. So up here, there's a header information called nozzle cleaner. It's just a header for, you know, basically what we have going on here. One thing I will note, and I think I've noted this in a video before, if you have a line and you want to put a notation after that line to basically kind of give off what that is, if you go after that and you go ahead and put that pound symbol after it, you can put notes in to your heart's content. So that can be helpful if you do modifications. One of the big things here I will go over too, when you are working with code and you're trying to sort things out, one of the things I like to do, and I'm not saying do it here, but we're going to do it right here anyways, is put a pound symbol in front of something. Go ahead and copy that like this, and go to the end of the line and basically paste that back in. So now you have the original that's basically commented out, but it's staying there for you, because you shouldn't make too many changes at the same time on one of these files. But you've commented out the original, so that one's now ignored. But you can always go back to it by deleting what you just did and uncommenting out what you had before. So that modification can, you know, be deleted if it didn't do what you wanted it to do. In this particular case, I don't really need to do that, so I can go ahead and delete this off. I don't need to comment out the macro name. So let's talk about that real quick. So we need to name our macros so the printer knows what to do with them, or knows what to call them. So when they call upon them, they know what the meaning is, or, you know, who to find. So we define the code here with our open brackets, G-code underscore macro, space. You got to have a space, and then the name of your macro. So in this particular case, it's clean underscore nozzle. Pretty simple, right? So that's the first line of our code. We could have a bunch of other things above this, but we're keeping things really simple, and we basically just wanted to find what our code is called, our macro. I'm going to skip down a little bit here before we get into this stuff here in the midsection, but I'm going to go into these G-codes. These G-codes are basic codes that are already built into Klipper. They're very common. Marlin uses code. They're G-code. They're pretty much what the printers use to talk to themselves and do what they need to do. So you'll find these staggered out throughout the code because they're calling upon doing something specific with the printer using G-code, because you know when you slice a file, you get G-code out of it. It's the same G-code. There's a couple of things in here that talk about what they do. I left them in there, and they're also in the Git version of this file, so you can see what they are, but we'll talk about as we go through them. I wanted to talk about, let's see, we had that go through here, right here. So you'll see in the same file, and this is kind of important, I have another defined macro called deep clean nozzle. Now I talked about a few seconds ago when I was talking about that in the console and the interface about how one is a 30 pass and one's a quicker. I think it's a 5 pass. But see how these are both in the same file, but they're just defined separately. So basically, we're basically telling this file, or when this file gets read by the printer, that at this point in time, this is now different code. So the code ended here, and then this is new code because of the brackets and how it's defined. So code is much like any reading that you would do. It's something that the machine can read to do a certain thing. It's instructions for the machine. Luckily for us, because of the way we've made things as human beings, the code is read from top down and pretty much from left to right, much the same way we do things in English and many other languages, except for Arabic, I think. Arabic is right to left, if I recall correctly. But that being said, let's talk about this beginning thing. So in the beginning here, we're defining some variables, and we don't necessarily need to use variables in this code, but I thought it was important because you can do a lot with variables, because once you define variables, you can call upon them quickly, and they can do things in the background. This particular variable right here is start x, which is the x position, and we're designating that with a number of 150. So whenever we call upon variable start x, it's always going to refer to that as 150. So in a lot of instances, we could just say 150, but in some instances we couldn't, especially if there was a count or something similar like that the program is using or the macro is using to do something. So we've defined our variables here. So this is a top section, and I strongly suggest if you're going to define variables in code in a macro that you should do it towards the top. That way they can be used further down in the code. Not only that, it keeps things neat and clean. So we have our start y, our start x, our start y, our start z. So all three of our planes are defined as to where our starts are. Obviously, you know where x, y, and z are. My z is 25. It's a little high because my particular scrub brush is a little bit further off the bed because I'm supposed to have my Kinematics on here. I don't currently, but that will be going on soon. Probably going to do that maybe on the live stream, next live stream I do, so we can do some more testing with the CNC tap. But anyways, yours may be much lower than that. It may be, if you're using a scrub brush that's actually down towards a flat normal bed, you're going to be probably closer to the 5 to 10 range. Variable wipe distance. So we're defining a distance or another number for our y. So in this particular case, it's a -3. So -3 basically telling the printer how far it's going to go back and forth on that. So it's going to come -3 every time it does it. So our wipe quantity is a 5. So that tells it how many times it's going to do it. So this is the nozzle clean. So this is a 5 time, like I said before, that's going to run through here. And then our speed is how fast it's going to run. And then our raise distance, which is basically after it gets done, how far is it going to raise up once it's done. It's going to go from 25 to 30. So it's going to clear what it's doing, about 5 more millimeters. And those are all of our variables. So variables at the top. And now we have G code. Okay, so variables aren't G code, but they are pullable, or once they're defined, you're able to use those in your G code. Okay, so when you have percentages, you're pretty much using the variables. So if XYZ, not in printer, dot toolhead, home axis, basically define the variable. So what that means basically is if the printer doesn't know where the print head is, it's going to home the printer. It's going to do that, 1, for safety, and 2, because it's just good practice. So basically, if for some reason you start your printer and the first thing you want to do is a nozzle clean, it's going to have to do a homing first before it will do that, because otherwise it won't know where to go to get to that brush. That's what that's defining. Once it's done that, once it knows that, or once it's done G28, it's going to end. So it's an end if. So end if, once this is done, it's going to end. It's going to finish this portion of it. It's going to move forward. If it wasn't able to do the G28 for whatever reason, it would not continue. So it would not continue, and that's pretty much the stop code. Okay, so right here, a G90, that's using absolute positioning. It's defined right here. It's out and about. It's basically a way to make sure that we're going to where we want. It's absolute positioning. We're going to move the nozzle start position. So the way to do that right here is in our defined location, which is start Z, start X, start Y. And then these F numbers here are basically how fast it's going to do that. So it's pulling upon the numbers that we have up top as variables, the start Z, start X, and start Y. And the reason why this makes it easy for somebody to manipulate this particular code is, as opposed to having to work down here, you can work up here. So if your start X, if you run this and it's not where you need it to be, you modify the numbers up top. You don't deal with the code down bottom. trust me. Okay, so that's what you have there. So now we're getting into the meat of things. This is how this code works. Okay, so right here we have percent symbol for the wipes in range 1, comma, wipe quantity plus 1. So wipe quantity we've defined up here as 5, okay? So it's going to start at 1. That's what this 1 is here for. And then it's going to do the wipe quantity plus 1. So it's going to do it until it gets to 5. So if we define that wipe quantity to be 30, for example, in the lower one, we'll talk about that in a moment, it would do it till 30. So it count 1 for every time it finishes the below code. So wipe left, wipe right. So it does this pretty quick, so it's kind of hard to see as it's doing it, but basically what we're doing here is we're G1, we're making a move, we're moving our X, we're going to start X, and then we're adding 10. So we're moving 10 from where our start X is, okay? And then we're doing Y, we're doing start where our Y position is, and then we're doing our wipe distance, our subtraction of our wipe distance, which we defined up here as -3. So every time we're basically going to start of Y and -3. We're going X plus 10. So we're basically calling this out to basically go back and forth, forward and back, and we're doing it at a speed of 300, which is wipe speed times 300. So up here we define our wipe speed as 50. So there you have your number. It's 50 times 300. You can do the math, 15,000. If you wanted to, you could have times 1 and change the number up here to 15,000. That's up to you, but right here, this is kind of a good way of doing it. That way you can change that speed up here in this area up top as opposed to messing with the code down below. If you do decide to mess with the code down below, which feel free to do it, it gets a little bit more complicated, but you can do whatever you want. You could, for instance, get rid of the Y and just have it do the back and forth thing. You could get rid of the X and just have it do front and back. You can do whatever you want. So we have wipe left, wipe right. So basically wipe left being the plus 10s and the wipe right being the minus 10s. And at the end of that, once it gets done with the count, like we said, we start at 1, wipe range plus 1. It basically will go up to its 5, and then it will end once it gets done with that. We've designated that in the percentage symbols. See? So percentage symbols up here, do this. Once you get done with that, do that. Okay? So after it's done, it does the G1, Z, and then the raise distance, which is what we talked about before. So it's going to raise it up to the 30. If I wanted to raise it up to 100, I could put 100 in here. If I wanted to raise it up to, 300, I put 300 in there. It wouldn't necessarily work on this printer because I believe on a 300 max you can go as 270, but you could try. Probably stay out of range. So once it's done all that, G-code, toolhead, we're going to home axes, and then we're going G28, and we're going to end if, and that'll be it. So basically, once it's all done with that, it's done. Whoops. Once we're all done with that, it's going to raise distance, it's going to stay where it is. I skipped ahead, apologize for that. Kind of caught myself there. So as a general rule, we have our variables that are defined that you can modify. We have the code that makes it work, and then we have our basically our count range right here. This is where it's counting. We have its basically its safety net right here to make sure it knows where it is before it does anything. And then we have our end, and then we have our basically our last thing, which is to move up. We could also have a G28 at the end of this if we wanted to. We could add some extruding if we wanted to purge the nozzle. It's not in this particular code, but we could. I would say I probably would have a purge separate from this particular code if I was doing it. And that would basically be using the extruder, moving to a certain location. But you can kind of get the idea of what this is doing based on what the code shows. So, in quick, not to drag this out too long, this is a relatively quick video. This is my deep clean. So the only thing that changes here is as opposed to a variable of 5, we've now got a variable wipe quantity of 15. So 15 here versus 5 here. Everything else is the same. So it's a copy and paste down below. One variable change gives me my deep clean versus my normal clean. Everything stays the same. So I'm going to hit save and restart if I was going to utilize this for the first time. But I'm going to X out of this and go back to my dashboard. And I'm going to go back to this camera real quick. And let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit, because I really do think this is a neat code. And if you don't have a nozzle clean and you do plan on doing something with a nozzle clean, go ahead and try this code out. I think it works really well. I've played around with it quite a bit. I've heated up the nozzle. I've done some minor, I haven't done much printing with this printer at all yet because I'm still working through it. I have my other printers to print with. This one I'm kind of working, I'm doing my videos with it. But it works really well. So let's go ahead and run this real quick. And let's do the deep just so you can really see it. As you see, it's going back and forth. Actually, wish I could get just a little bit lower. There you go. You can kind of see the nozzle now. It's hard to see, but it's just scraping the edge of that nozzle, back and forth, front to back, cleaning it up 100%, which is pretty awesome. Well, this is a relatively quick video. It's 20 minutes. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was kind of a boring video. There wasn't a lot going on in it about some G-code and stuff like that, but do like mark this somehow or bookmark it, because there's going to be a point in time where you're going to have questions about making your own macros, and there's a lot of information in this particular video that'll help you out with that. If you have questions about doing simple macros, I am not a macro god by any means, but I'm more than willing to try to help you out if you got something simple you're trying to do, or if you have a little bit of code that's not working out for you. Go ahead and email me or leave me a comment down below. I'm going to be doing live streams here probably every week or so, probably every other week. I want to thank all of my members on my channel. I am getting off Patreon if you're on that, so go ahead and pull your membership off of that if you would. It'd be great, and if you feel like it, if you want to, go ahead and throw it back on the YouTube channel here. Makes it a lot easier for me to kind of work with one thing. Other than that, I will see you real soon, and happy printing.